Paul McKeever, I have to tell you, the Freedom Party of Ontario and this man, some of the most sensible stuff I've ever heard. And I say this as someone who has trouble voting for any particular party, but really, a lot of common sense and objective analysis of what is going on. He's a politician and a lawyer, and always great fun to have here. Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, Michael. How are you?
And a man with the finest beard in Canadian politics.
I thank you for that.
The native issue, even calling it an issue almost sounds patronising, but there's so much hyperbole and emotion and rhetoric around all this. One thing, though, that most people seem to agree on, right and left, is the Indian Act, which in itself, I mean, the terminology is archaic. I don't think it's racist, but it's certainly patronising and anachronistic. It has to go. But the reason it has to go, I mean, one of the reasons it has to go is it's very collectivist, it's very socialistic.
Oh, yes. And in fact, the role of it, really, is to set up each reserve as sort of a mini communist utopia where nobody owns the land. You know, we'll be all there to share the land, as the old Guess Who song says. And then
really?
everyone, oh, yes. And you know, and they have to vote on everything communally. And of course, whenever the government seems to be undermining that communal aspect of things, well, then all the lefties will get behind anybody who's rallying to the cause of saving those communist utopias within Canadian society. This is what, you know, the two sides both want the Indian Act gone, but one side wants it gone so that every Canadian can have individual rights of property. The other side wants it gone because they're afraid that it's being eroded to the point or changed to the point that suddenly an Indian, someone called an Indian under the Act, will have rights to their own land.
Well, this is a very good point, because it is something from, what, the late 19th century, which at the time, is it racist? I don't think so. Is it colonial? No. Colonial is something very specific. If invariably people with power, often white people from Europe or North America, go to an area and say, we will take everything you have, we'll take from you, and then we'll leave you. No, we're giving billions of dollars. We are giving to people on reserves. But I still think it's anachronistic. But a native person can maybe own a house, but they can't own the land the house is on. Now, we've learned that a property-owning democracy is the best way to guarantee peace and justice and coexistence. If you treat people like children, if everything you need is relying on the goodwill and altruism of the chief, don't offend that person, how can they have any sort of future?
Well, and this is it. There's a false distinction here, too. They say, you know, you're undermining our culture, which is of a collective, you know, all around the communal pot, we're sharing.
No.
But you know what? Even if all of that is true, what is stopping anybody from doing that voluntarily? Why do you need a law that says you must live that way and that you cannot own any property, that you must do as the chief says and must live where the chief says? This is actually, these are the Stalinists out there that are backing the idle no more. They like that. They'd like to see it expanded. And if they think that the Harper government is going to be on some kind of agenda where they're going to assimilate people and give them property rights, these Western values, well, they'd rather secede, which is what they're all talking about, secession, and self-government. What they mean self-government, they mean no Canadian federal government.
Well, some do. There are a few radicals. A lot of sensible native leaders and people understand the reality of all this. Look, the idea of living in the past, slavery. Native people practiced slavery. Often acts of genocide against other tribes. Appalling, grotesque treatment. Read some of the diaries of missionaries who wanted to be part of the native community and learn their languages. Horrible stuff. No, we reject some of these, as we reject some of what Europeans did and people who came to Canada, the way they acted. But this notion we have to live in the past, there's nothing progressive by its very nature about that. We all want justice for people, but that's not going to be rooted in a pretend civilization that frankly didn't really exist.
Well, and there was no Indian Act in the past forcing everyone to live communally. It was voluntary. That's what we've lost. You know, and here's the other thing. This isn't a Harper agenda. They keep calling it. That shows you that it's left versus right. This agenda was actually introduced by the Trudeau government in 1969. There's a policy paper, you can read it online. It was penned by Jean Chrétien, and it said, get rid of the Indian Act, eliminate all treaties, give private property rights to the people who live on those reserves right now, treat everyone equally. This is not an agenda that's left or right. It's a pro-human, pro-justice, pro-humanity agenda. And frankly, if all of the conspiracy theories are true, thank goodness.
Now, I have to say that when you speak to older native leaders who've been involved in politics for some time, they will tell you that, certainly on a personal level, the empathy and the compassion they receive from conservatives right now is far greater than they ever did, in particular compared to the Pierre Trudeau years. If anyone had, I think, a personal issue with native people and a lack of understanding, it was Pierre Trudeau. But now apparently he's champion, and his son says, I'm the man to lead you to the brave New Jerusalem, which I think will resemble actually the good old Gaza Strip. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael.